Welcome back. I just want to say thank you all for staying. Friendly reminder that at the end of the session, we'll have you please type your questions in the chat, and our media specialist, Jason Harper, will read the questions off to the presenters in the order that they are received. It is an honor to introduce our next speakers for our session. This is the 3 o'clock session, Funding Facts, Understanding the School District Budget. We have Trent Carroll, WDE Chief Operations Officer, and Leslie Zimmerschied, WDE School Foundation Supervisor. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and talk to you a little bit about school finance in Wyoming. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, how does that look? Okay. So our session this afternoon is about school district budgets and a little bit about the process that happens between the state and the local district, and how parents can be involved and understand what all is involved with this. This session will cover the different sources of funding for schools in Wyoming and a little bit about how it's allocated. And at the end, we will talk about the best times, the most effective times to influence the school district budgeting process. So in Wyoming, we have something called the basket of goods, and it's defined in our Wyoming statute. The basket of goods um, legally defines what must be provided at all schools in Wyoming. And so what we do is the legislature defines that basket, that educational program that every student must receive. And then the second step to that is to determine the cost of providing that program. And throughout all of this, the question to ask yourselves is, what does a proper and modern public education include? So instruction in Wyoming is aligned to the state standards, and the standards are based on the basket of goods. So I believe this morning everyone heard more about the standards, so I won't talk about that too much, but those are your expectations for the year. The basket is really the tools and everything that is needed by the school district to meet those standards or teach those standards. Um, this is really important for parents because it helps understand what your children are entitled to receive at school. And it helps you understand a little bit better when there are funding cuts. Are we removing required services, or are we just looking at extras that we didn't need? So it's always important to come back to the basket of goods. So a few things that are included in the basket of goods. The first thing that's outlined in the Wyoming statute is the Common Core of Knowledge. And these are the things that must be provided in terms of content areas. So we have reading, social studies, math. These are all of the major content areas, and the standards are aligned to these content areas. Then also we have the Common Core of Skills. This is included in the basket, and it includes a really great, robust set of soft skills that are important for all students to learn throughout their educational career. The basket of goods, by covering both the Common Core of Knowledge and the Common Core of Skills, that means that your children should have consistent access to all of these things throughout their educational career. It includes the instruction, but also the necessary support services for these things. And it should apply everywhere in Wyoming, no matter where you live. The next part of the basket are programs designed for students, special populations of students. And the first one is children with disabilities. And these are students that have been evaluated in accordance with rules and regulations of the state board. So there must be consideration within the basket of goods for students with disabilities. And the next one is students that are considered gifted and talented and have been identified by professionals or other qualified instructors as having outstanding abilities. These are students who are capable of high performance. So the basket of goods must also um, identify and provide resources for these students. And then the last section of the basket are two things. The first is for co-curricular activities. These are activities that are outside of the core curriculum, but go along with it. They supplement the core curriculum to provide educational experiences for students that they wouldn't get in the classroom. And the last item are world languages. Our state board has standards for world languages for the early grades. So all of these together show what is considered to be a complete and robust education in Wyoming. It's really important to know what's not included in the basket. The basket does not ensure identical programs at every single school. And it also doesn't ensure that there are very small class sizes everywhere. The basket also doesn't give us luxuries. We're not going to get very fancy amenities or facilities, and we might not have access to every single possible extracurricular offering in every single school. So I said we look at what is required, and then we have a formula that determines the amount of money that is given to school districts. And that is done through some very complicated formulas. And the money is then distributed to the school districts in the form of a block grant. And the block grant is given to districts with the idea that they then provide their priorities and determine what will be taught in their own local communities. This year, for the school year that's coming up, 26-27, for that school year, there are some changes. We have now what's called the instructional silo, which is putting some restrictions on the ability of local school districts to move money around. More funds are being designated as only for salaries and can't be switched into other things, and that's a new thing for next year. And we'll be working through that together to understand these new parameters and what's going on with that. So it will be new, and I just want to let you know that we're estimating for next year that the about 46% of the funding for school districts will be in this restricted silo for salaries. Overall, salaries make up between 80 and 85% of the block grant every year. Operations is about 15%, and then supplies and materials make up about 5%. This is a pie chart to show about where the percentages lie for the upcoming school year. As I said, for next year, we're estimating that the restricted silo is about 46%, and that those are all school level funds. The unrestricted amount of school level funding is about 15% overall. Health insurance about 12%, and then it moves down from there. Central office is 4%, and utilities are just over 3%. In Wyoming, the funding is equalized between districts, and we do that by looking at the amount of funding that is required to provide the basket in each district, and that is your guarantee, the foundation guarantee. And once we know that amount, we subtract out the local resources the amount that can be provided by local taxes. And if there is a shortfall, then the state makes that up. And if there is an excess, then that district then pays that excess back to the state so that it can be distributed to other districts. This is how the guarantee looks for next year, broken out a different way. It's about $1.43 billion. And so those school level funds are about 65% of the total guarantee for next year. And some of that's restricted, some of it's not restricted. District level, this would be not only your central office, but also administration, supplies and materials, like for your board or for your maintenance, for your school district buildings. Utilities are included in your district level expenditures as well. There are several parts of the funding model that are provided as reimbursements, and that would be transportation. So the state reimburses for both the operation of transportation and also for the purchase of vehicles. The block grant and the funding formulas that we use are based on a lot of different inputs, but the primary input is the number of students in the school in the prior years. And so changes in enrollment patterns hit the staffing ratios the hardest. If enrollment increases, districts can be made whole for that increase, but it is with a delay. So districts very often have to serve more students before the funding completely catches up. And on the other end, if enrollment is decreasing, the funding is reduced, also with a delay. And this becomes a problem and is an issue to discuss with your local board, because many school districts have fixed costs that can't change. That includes like your transportation routes. Your utilities don't go down if your enrollment decreases. So these are fixed costs that sometimes put pressure on a budget when enrollment is decreasing. And just to reiterate, staffing is always the largest item in a school district budget. Enrollment, when enrollment is growing, it could be a point of discussion at the local board level for expanding course offerings or new hires. When enrollment is decreasing, that would be a time to have a discussion on larger class sizes or program consolidation. School construction is also funded by the state in Wyoming, and that falls not with the Department of Ed, but with the State Construction Department. They have a whole division over there called School Facilities Division. And when you get these slides, you'll be able to link on that, and it'll take you to the school facilities portion of their website. They are responsible for the buildings and facilities in Wyoming. They do not own the buildings, but they are responsible for making sure that districts are funded for maintenance of those buildings. When it comes to maintenance, routine everyday maintenance items are funded within the block grant. But major renovations, major maintenance projects, and new construction, capital construction, that funding comes in a separate stream from the State Construction Department. Even though the funding comes from the state, your local board is still responsible for deciding when and how to request and start those projects. In Wyoming, our school funding is a shared responsibility between the local community, the state, and the federal government. The local share is mostly property taxes, but like I said before, it's equalized statewide. School districts levy property taxes as required by state law, and school districts actually cannot change the mills in Wyoming. They are set in state statute, so it's a 25 mil levy at the local level and a 6 mil that is across the whole county. So those are set by Wyoming law and cannot be changed. Also included in the local share are the registration fees for vehicle license plates. And this money is used first within the county and the school districts within the county before we get into the idea of recapture. So it always begins in the county and is used first by the county before moving back to the state. The state revenue is really tied to energy markets and investment earnings on state funds. Most of this funding flows through the school foundation program, and the funding that we get at the state level comes from a couple of different sources. The largest one being federal mineral royalties, which primarily come from oil and gas and coal. The next largest bucket at the state level is the state levied property taxes, and this is a 12 mil levy on all property. And then we have a lot of investment income that comes from our common school lands within the state. And then we have some other minor revenues that flow into the school foundation program from time to time. The federal dollars that we receive are the smallest share of funding. These are very targeted and they are very restricted. When they are given to school districts, they have a designated purpose and can only be spent on those things. This is what it looks like as a pie chart. As I said before, the federal is the smallest amount at 10%, and the largest amount, about 46%, comes from the state. Now I want to talk a little bit about school district budgets. Budgets are required to be posted online. They're not usually on social media. They may be there, but they have to be on the main website, and that's where you should search for those if you'd like to find them. If you can't find them, they must be made available to you upon request, and you can contact your school district main office if you can't find the budget document. Important things to look for if you are searching would be words like fiscal services or budget and audit or business office. I found several places where the budget documents are listed under different names. So if you're searching the school district's websites, try a few different things. And then if you can't find it, definitely give them a call because they have to provide that to you and send you to the correct web page. Budget hearings must be properly noticed, and that usually means a countywide or a local newspaper. And so I've just included a couple copies here of what that might look like. They usually say notice of hearing and the name of the school district, and it'll say budget and the year and where it will be held and what time. And then the budget hearing notice generally has an outline of the different series of funds that are available for the year. And just a quick breakdown, the actual hearing will have more detailed information, but a high-level overview will be published in your local paper. And it can be online. This one over here from Laramie One I found on the website, but sometimes they are in the actual printed paper as well. So let's talk about the time to speak, when to speak up. The best time is not in July at the final hearing that's been provided in the newspaper. The best time is many months before that. It's best to become involved with your school board in the spring when the district is building their draft budget. Every school district holds workshops and maybe has some focus groups throughout the spring, so that's the best time to get involved with that. Local school boards do decide how to spend their budget money, but they generally don't control how much money exists, right? That comes from the funding formulas and the finance laws that are passed by the state legislature. A lot of districts, when they ask for input, they may call it an advisory committee, they may call it a workshop, it may say council or task force. So look for advertisements from your school district with words like that. Things that the board can control include things like staffing allocations inside their district. They can decide which programs to prioritize. School districts often have one-time funds that can be allocated on a special basis. And boards are required to pass their budget in July, but they really control all the rest of the timeline for their workshops and public input. School boards don't control school finance formulas, they don't control the state revenue levels, and they don't control federal funding rules and laws. Because schools are mostly funded by the state and not by local taxes, it is important if you want to be involved to follow the state legislature. The state legislature meets between December and February to discuss the ECA, which is the annual inflation adjustment, and that is included in the state budget that is passed in February or March of every year. The state budget works on a 2-year cycle, and so the main budget is worked in the even numbered years, but there is a supplementary budget that goes in the odd number years. And then also there are interim meetings throughout the summer where the education committees work on their priorities and discuss potential upcoming legislation that could impact schools and the school district funding formulas. So it's really important to get involved with the state legislature if you want to have a complete grasp of the school finance landscape in Wyoming. And that is the end of my slides because I know there will be lots of questions.
All right, Leslie, we got a first question here. Where does social emotional learning come into play, and how is the WD addressing the issues in schools today? Bullying, children struggling with social skills and healthy communication with peers and family, and what does funding look like for this element?
So I'm going to start by saying I'm not an educator. I'm on the finance side. We've had a lot of work over the last few years on mental health grant funding that has been provided to school districts. And that is also a topic for one of the interim joint education meetings. And so it's important to know that the state legislature has been paying attention to mental health issues and has been working on funding formulas for that.
Next question. What state-level funding barriers prevent districts from providing one-on-one support for students with social and emotional needs who require regulation support in order to learn? Why might districts default to placement and functional life skills programs instead of providing individualized supports that would allow students to remain in more academically appropriate settings?
I'm not sure if I'm the right person to answer that one.
This question might be better for someone maybe from our special education division or another part of the agency to speak to that.
Our special education session is the next one, so we can maybe loop back around with that question.
Sounds great. Next question. Could gaming be a source of funds for education? If so, how?
Are we talking about like the skilled gaming? Because if so, that already is one of the funding sources to the state. So we do receive revenue into the school foundation program every year from the skill games that are out there.
And the next question, how do we find out about budget workshops?
Those would be through your school board, through their notification process where they announce upcoming school board meetings. They should also provide notice of the budget workshops as well.
Are draft budgets public record?
That's a good question. I believe if it has been presented during an open meeting, that it would be a public record, but I believe that if it is not been presented yet, then it is not a public record. But that would be a good one to maybe ask your local board or your business manager or possibly the public records ombudsman.
Next question. School districts are reimbursed for the cost of the IEP placement of a student in a residential facility, both in and out of state. Do the school districts still continue to collect their ADM for a student who is placed out of district? Essentially, a student is placed in a facility that does not cost the district anything in the end, but they still collect the ADM for the student.
Right. These are generally case by case situations, but we do check to make sure there's no double dipping. If a placement into a facility provides educational services, then we would not expect to see the local district also providing those services, and so the district would not be funded because they're not providing any services. So it is very much a case by case basis, and we do look at these quite often to ensure that we're not double dipping for funding.
Next question. Could data centers be taxed for education purposes? And if so, how?
That's a good one. That is a good question. So they are, of course, property, and they are currently taxed for property taxes. But in terms of additional taxes to support education, I'm not sure. That's a great question.
So this goes back to the reimbursements question. Would this be youth alternatives be considered double dipping?
I don't know, is that a facility? If it's a facility and there's a placement either through an IEP team or a court order, we would right, like I said, we review those to make sure that we're not double dipping. Usually if there's a court order, it specifies the funding streams.
Next question. Do school districts get money for students that homeschool in their district?
Great question. There are provisions and there's formulas for part-time students in public schools. And so if a homeschool student takes a class or two from their local district, the district does receive funding for that proportional share of the day. But generally, school districts don't just receive money for homeschool students that do not participate in school district course offerings.
There are no current kind of questions in the queue, but I'm asking to see if we have any further questions. We'll give them a few minutes. We got another question here. How can we get money for new and innovative programs?
That's a good one. I think the first place to start would be with the state legislature. If you're talking about adding money into the system, the way to do that would be to work with your local legislators, at the state level, to add funds into the budget. If you are talking about maybe moving funds that already exist at the district level into an innovative or new program, then that would be a conversation that you would want to have early in the budget process with your local board at one of those workshops. If there are funds available, or if it becomes a priority of the local board, you can work with them to establish new programs using existing funding.
Next question. The Wyoming High School Activities Association is saying they might have to cut extracurricular programs because of the recalibration this year. Is there value in taking programs out of extracurricular and putting them back as intercurricular, such as FFA and FBLA?
Trent, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how to answer that one either. I think that there could be value in examining, I guess, any possible reallocation of resources. I know that activities is a hot topic right now, and we're aware of some of those conversations that are happening with the Wyoming High School Activities Association, their recent board meeting. And this is going to be a topic at the upcoming recalibration committee meeting in Lander at the end of June. So there will be some further discussion on that. That might be a good opportunity to provide public comment and help that committee understand the importance of it in your local community and any requests that you might have along those lines.
There are no more comments in the queue, but we are asking once again if anybody has any more questions. Just give us one moment. All right, we have another question in the queue here. Projection on future federal lands.
Yeah, that is a great question. I think it's important to remember that federal funds are a small part. Direct federal funds are a small part of funding in Wyoming. The bigger issue that we're always thinking about is that so much of the state funding is derived from federal mineral royalties, and so it is important to watch what's going on with the federal funding from both of those perspectives. But if I could tell the future, I don't think I'd be here. So I think it's very difficult to project very far into the future with federal funding.
I'd like to give a huge shout out and a big thank you to both Leslie and Trent, two experts in the field. Can't thank you enough. And to everyone else, we'll take a short break and we will be back for our last session on special ed at 4 o'clock sharp. Thank you.
Thank you.